going for time. Oh, we're cooking on gas.
Keep going.
Order in council for Christchurch Cathedral. Things will slow down here. Who's coming to the end of the table for that? Okay.
You have to appreciate officers aren't used to you actually moving so quickly. Can we do this more often? Thank
Got a
you.
mover and a seconder, Madam Mayor.
Yeah.
Madam Mayor, got a mover and a seconder.
So staff
Have the second.
do a slight amendment.
Oh, there's going to be a slight amendment to it. So look, if they're on their way down, well, Island won't be down here yet.
They're on the way.
I want to.
2 minutes.
Could I ask that they've put separately the 1 and 2 when they are put up?
Yeah. Apparently they've got an amendment. So 10th. Are they very far away? That looks like the team for Island Road, Middleton Road and Riccarton
Deal
Road.
with that one.
Right, you've just won yourself an item on the agenda. Come forward. Oh,
You might as well get them to come because this is going to be a long debate.
Fight.
Like the move, Richard. Absolutely.
eh?
Transfer's going to take longer.
You think
Okay.
Cathedral will be quicker?
I don't. Well, I was going to because the cathedral was a bit slow coming in the room, but come forward. Come forward. No, well, sorry, Richard. Hopefully this won't take long. Order in council for Christchurch Cathedral. Apparently there's an amendment that you wanted to make to the resolution.
Yeah, thank you. There was a really useful discussion in the informal this morning, so I'd like to thank the councillors for that. There's a change to resolution 1.4 that I've asked the council secretary to put up as an option for the council to consider. If you just scroll, I'm not sure whether that's available yet. Now, the discussion in the informal this morning raised a concern with there being a council resolution at this stage that expresses a preference for where the relocated site might be for the Citizens' War Memorial. The staff proposed resolution in 1.4 had suggested that the council written comment to the minister say that the relocation of the memorial should be a controlled activity only if it's relocated at the same time to another site in Cathedral Square. Now, there will be a need for another decision-making process by the council, even if that is what the minister decides to put in the OIC, because the council as landowner still needs to go through another decision-making process. But what I've put up as an alternative resolution there is that the council resolution not specify that the relocated site ought to be within Cathedral Square. Instead, that it needs to be relocated to a publicly accessible site at the same time as it being moved from its current site. So that's an alternative for the council to consider. It's not the preference or the recommendation of the council's heritage experts, because their view is that the most suitable site for the relocation for heritage reasons is within Cathedral
And it
Square.
is, yes.
And so they'll be available to answer any questions about that. But this is an option for the council to consider. Now, is that PowerPoint available to everyone? There was a PowerPoint that went on Big Tin Can yesterday, which I'd like to briefly run through to again give an overview of what is in this council report. The issue that the council report deals with is a proposed order in council that the minister thinks is necessary or desirable to streamline resource consent processes for cathedral reinstatement. Now, the activity for which the consent applications is streamlined means that the council can't decline resource consent for it if those streamlining provisions go in. But it means that other activity can still be proposed by the Christchurch Reinstatement Limited. They can seek resource consent for it through standard RMA process. So if it's not provided for in the OIC in a streamlined process, it doesn't mean it can't happen. It just means the resource consent application for it goes through standard process. The issue that the proposed order in council is trying to address is that the district plan at the moment requires resource consent for reinstatement, for moving the Citizens' War Memorial, and for removal of the London Plain trees. And those applications might be publicly notified, limited notified, they might be submitted as an opposition, there might be appeals to the Environment Court. And the concern or the issue is that that might slow down the cathedral reinstatement and it might increase costs. Now, the central government's solution for this is an order in council to change the district plan and change the RMA. And there is a piece of legislation that was made in 2017 for just that purpose. The Christchurch Cathedral Reinstatement Act 2017 was made for no reason other than to enable there to be an order in council to facilitate the reinstatement of the cathedral. And the council's submission on that in 2017 was in support. The council supported the minister having this power to make these orders in council. Now, part of the reason why the council supported it is because of the purpose of that Reinstatement Act. The purpose is stated clearly in the Act itself as being to facilitate reinstatement of the cathedral, recognising its contribution to the cultural, social and economic well-being of Christchurch, its importance to Christchurch regeneration and its heritage value. So when the minister is exercising a power to make an order in council, the objective is to meet those purposes, facilitate the reinstatement, make sure that that's done in a way that it's contributing to social, cultural and economic well-being, and recognising its heritage value. The Act sets up the process for the order in council to go through. First step is that Christchurch Reinstatement Limited had to have asked the minister to propose an order in council. Second step is that the minister has formed, Associate Minister has formed a preliminary view that the order in council is necessary or desirable for the purpose of facilitating reinstatement. The minister then makes an explanatory document available to the community and the public can make written comments on it. That's the stage we're now at. The minister set a deadline of 22nd of June for those written comments. So what this report is about is what is this council's written comment back to the minister going to be. After the minister's got all those written comments, the order in council will be reviewed by the Cathedral Reinstatement Review Panel, which is a panel that's been appointed with a former High Court judge, some lawyers, some planners, and then the minister will decide whether the order in council proposed is necessary or desirable for the purpose of facilitating the cathedral's reinstatement. And if so, it's going to be law. There's opportunity for this council to engage with Christchurch Reinstatement Limited over the process for the cathedral reinstatement, and that has been happening in a good way already, and it's going to continue. There's been early proactive discussions between the applicant for consent and the council's resource consent officers. That's going to continue. There could be further engagement between the council and Christchurch Reinstatement Limited to assist this council's understanding of the necessity or desirability of having the order in council or specific aspects of it. And we've got some time for that between now and the 22nd of June when the council's written comments need to go in. So the council could, if it wishes, ask the Chief Executive to engage with Christchurch Reinstatement Limited in the final approval of the council's written comments to go in a week's time. Now, we thought it might be useful to run through what staff see as being the core questions of either expert opinion or policy that lie behind the council officer recommendations in the report. So the purpose of these next two slides is to highlight those key points that we think are embodied in the recommended written comments to give back to the Minister. And I'd like to emphasise here again that the context is that what the Ordering Council is proposing to do is to identify particular activities that will have a streamlined process for a resource consent application. If the proposed activities are outside of the scope of those streamlined activities, then they can still happen, as I said before, but the application for consent needs to go through a standard RMA process. And that could involve notification, hearings, appeals, etc. So, first key question. Well, the broad question is, how does the council want its written comments to achieve the two joint objectives of the Reinstatement Act, being an expedited, cost-effective reinstatement and recognition of the Cathedral's contribution to social and cultural wellbeing and its heritage values? So first key question, should costs and delays be reduced? Costs and delays of the resource consent process? If yes, then the council supports the Ordering Council, as it did in 2017. I don't expect there to be any change in the council position there. Second thing is, and it ties very closely to the first one, should there be no submitters or appeals except by the applicant for appropriate applications? Because that's what reducing costs and reducing delays means. The only way of doing it is to say that there's not going to be a right for people to put in submissions or lodge appeals. So if you agree that there should be no submitters or appeals for some of these, for the streamlined applications, then the council supports the OIC the same way as it did in 2017. Now then we get into the nub of some of the detail in the staff report. First recommendation in that staff report is that the scope of reinstatement activity should be narrowed a little bit. The scope of the reinstatement activity for which the resource consent application will be streamlined. If the council is perfectly satisfied with the broad scope that's proposed by the Minister and the OIC, then you simply support the OIC. If, however, you think it should be narrowed, then you follow the staff recommendation. Now, next key issue is to what extent should the council, as a consent authority under the RMA, have scrutiny of the merit of heritage protection, urban design and other matters of control. Now the reason that's an issue for you is because the recommendation in the staff report is that those matters of control should be expanded a bit. They should include some of the ones that are already in the district plan. They haven't been carried through at this stage into the proposed Ordering Council. The staff view is that if they are carried through, they're made more extensive, then it enables the council as consent authority to achieve that balance between the facilitation and the protection of the heritage values a little bit better than is proposed in the Ordering Council. Then we get to a series of questions about the Citizens' War Memorial. So, first question, should it be deconstructed, removed, placed in storage if a heritage professional or a conservation architect says it's okay for that to happen? Because that's the way the Ordering Council, the proposed Ordering Council is written. It says if you've got that expert who says that can happen, then the council has to grant consent for it. So if you agree with that, then you support the OIC. But if you think that there should be more prerequisites before the Citizens' War Memorial can be removed as a controlled activity under the RMA, then you'd follow the officer recommendation for those prerequisites. And then we get into the detail of the prerequisites. You've got two options in front of you. You've got the one in the officer's report and you've got the alternative drafting that I've just put up on the screen. And your third one there is, should the Citizens' War Memorial be immediately relocated in the square if moved? Now, it's the firm advice to the council from its heritage experts that the most suitable site for relocation of the Citizens' War Memorial is within the square. So they're not comfortable with, or they're recommending that the council not support the OIC providing for controlled activity for the removal of the Citizens' War Memorial unless it's relocated at the same time in Cathedral Square. That's their recommendation. The alternative is that you go with what's in the OIC. That's one alternative because that enables the reinstatement company to remove the war memorial from its site and put it in storage. Another alternative is the one that I put on the screen before, which is that your resolution be that you want the council comment to support the relocation of the Citizens' War Memorial only if it's going to be relocated to another publicly accessible site at the same time. Now, if you go for that option, you're leaving it open for, you're not giving any indication of your views at this stage about where that relocated site would be. Last matter of detail is to do with the trees. Now, as currently drafted, the proposed OIC says that the council would be required to grant resource consent for removal of the trees if asked, on the conditions set out in the order in council. The council's city arborist recommends to council that the value of those trees is so high, their heritage value, their amenity value is so high that the removal shouldn't go through a controlled activity unless there's a couple of prerequisites. One is that it's necessary for the reinstatement of the cathedral in its current footprint, which by implication is saying the value of the trees is higher than any sort of addition to the footprint of the cathedral. So if the consent application is for the purpose of an addition to the cathedral, then that application for removal of the trees would go through standard RMA process. And there's another prerequisite proposed there, which is that rather than it just being an engineer's call about whether the removal of the trees is necessary, it should only be a controlled activity if a technical arborist says it's necessary for the reinstatement of the cathedral in its current footprint. So they're the key matters of combined expert opinion and policy calls that are implicit in the recommendations in the officer's report for the written comments. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess that the challenge, I think, for me and some of the councillors will be the fact that we weren't aware that this was a process that the Crown wanted to use as a mechanism for these things, and I just wanted to kind of query about its relationship with the website reinstate.org.nz, which is all about the project, and it says this: what's happening with the trees? The trees will be cared for and maintained during the project, for example through regular pruning. We're hoping to produce progeny from the London plane trees through grafting. One of the trees south of the cathedral was planted in 1884 at the time of consecration. The project team recognises the significance of the listed trees on the cathedral site. A qualified arborist has developed work plans that help to protect the trees from damage during works in accordance with the approved tree maintenance and management plan. This plan includes restrictions around how close people and machinery can get to the tree, for example, so the drip line and canopy is not disturbed. So there's nothing in there that indicates that the trees may be moved. The second is what's happening with the Citizens' War Memorial. The project team enables access for the RSA and for the Christchurch City Council to clean and polish the memorial. It will be protected during the upcoming stabilisation phase works. I spoke to the chair of the company at the time that the RSA wanted to move the memorial, and he said it did not need to be moved for the purposes of reinstatement. So I'm at a loss as to why these two items are now urgently in front of us for discussion in this way.
Yeah, I can understand that. There's nothing in the explanatory document that's come out from the Associate Minister that provides that detail. What the proposed regulation does is enable resource consent applications for these activities. It doesn't require them to happen, obviously, it just enables the resource consent. And it means that the consent application can't be declined if the applicant applies for it. The indication you've just read out is that suggests that the applicant thinks there's no need to apply for it, but someone's
except that the statement that the minister's provided is that the memorial will be moved and the trees may be. So less certainty around the future of the trees. I mean, an absolute certainty around the future of the war memorial, and that is that it will be moved. But I would have thought that we would expect to see something more. So I'm in favour of the officer recommendation that we put in these prerequisites to provide the protections necessary under the plan, and they shouldn't be. They're not a. I mean, we all want to see the result. We want to see the outcome, which is the cathedral reinstated. That's what we've all committed to, and want to get it happening. But I think, just in terms of process, I'd like us to take the officer recommendations.
I'd actually like to sit down with the company and the Anglican Church and talk to them directly, because I'd actually prefer this pulled and to talk with them, because it's just all over the place.
Yeah, it's not all over the place. It is a process that's available to them, and I actually personally think that it was an oversight that we weren't notified earlier.
But their own website says that these don't need to be removed.
That's a long time ago. That's right at the very start of the process, and I'm just saying that we don't have much time because a process has been triggered, and we as a council need to respond to it. And I guess what I'm working my way through is an apparent contradiction, but the contradiction is obviously down to time and the further research that their engineers and others have done. So, I mean, people haven't been sitting back doing nothing in the meantime.
realise that.
I agree that we should invite the company to come in. The church isn't involved in the decisions at this stage. It is in the hands of the company. So I think we should ask the company if they'd be willing to come and have a talk to us, but we have to respond to this in the time frame that we've been given.
But we're making a decision that we don't even know needs to be made.
No, we're facilitating, we're making a point that we don't agree with the proposal that has been put forward, and that we would like to see an alternative proposal. We can't control the process, we need to submit on it.
But if this goes ahead and we vote and approve the council staff recommendation, on 2, technically we're supporting moving permanently the cenotaph.
No, we support it being a controlled activity under the plan. What we're doing is supporting it being a controlled activity, not a permitted activity.
Correct. So what we're supporting is that there be a streamlined process for moving it if the prerequisites are met, and that if the prerequisites are not met, then that resource consent application goes through standard RMA process. What it's not doing is expressing a view on behalf of the council as landowner about the appropriateness of moving it, or where the relocated site should be.
Yeah, and that's why they've changed it from a suitable site on council-owned land in the square to publicly accessible site.
but it seems that the point where could be shifted to is the spot where the police kiosk is.
No.
No.
That would require us to consult on the location. So every locations that have been discussed, and there have been more than one location, there's been Latimer Square, Cranmer Square, and two parts of Cathedral Square. They've all been discussed in various documents that the RSA have put out a number of years ago. So all of those require a council consultation because they can't.
Needs to be moved, which we haven't
They
actually
can't be moved. No, but it's not our decision to move it. It doesn't belong to us, and it doesn't belong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if it needed to be moved,
Yes.
why would we choose to be involved in it? I realise that it is a citizens' move.
This is a controlled activity. This is our district plan. So we're the regulator. They're asking to, permitted activity?
Controlled activity.
They're asking for permitted,
No, they're asking for controlled activity.
but not this level of control.
Correct, not this level of control.
So we're asking for it to be much more controlled.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, the council's involved in this whether it wants to be or not, because as the Mayor says, what we're talking about is an application for resource consent under the RMA. In that process, the council is the consent authority. The council makes the decision on the resource consent application. So the council is involved wearing that hat. The council's also going to be involved wearing its other hat as landowner under the Local Government Act if the relocation is to be onto council land. So, wearing your first hat as regulator, what do you want the minister's changes to the OIC to enable? Do you want the minister's changes to the district plan? Do you want them to enable the war memorial to be moved simply if a heritage expert says that it's appropriate for it to be moved? Or do you want there to be other prerequisites?
But the wording is totally kind of saying if a heritage says it has to be moved, but there are engineering processes around which perhaps it wouldn't need to be moved. And I realise that on the things you put up, that seems the primary is speed, i.e. time and cost. And that I don't believe should be the primary.
But Tim, it says here that an engineer has certified that it cannot be reasonably, practicably protected in its current location and or the economic viability justifies removing it to make way for another structure. So
could they move it and then reinstate it where it was prior at its original site?
Yep, they can apply for consent for that. Yep.
But can we ask or insist that that is what we are wanting? So the cenotaph is moved during construction and reinstatement of the cathedral and then replaced back in that spot. We haven't got that anywhere, have we? So they could actually remove it, do some different things and say it can't go back there.
Yeah, they can.
Yeah.
And one option available to the council on this report is instead of what staff have put up there under 1.4, for that the council written comment be exactly what you've just proposed, which is that the council supports the controlled activity status only if the Citizens' War Memorial, if removed, is going to be put back in exactly the same spot within a set period of time. That is an option.
So is that something that staff have considered? Because it doesn't seem to be here.
This is a heritage matter. I think, Amanda, it would be your preference, would it?
Yeah. I mean, why isn't it? Yeah. But is it, the thing we're missing is it's a Citizens' War Memorial, and yes, it's an Anglican cathedral, but all creeds and colours go there to remember and to honour those that served. And that's what we've got to remember. We can have all the reports we want. So could we state, in your opinion, that we could say, if it needs to be removed, that within a specific period of time it can be re-established back in the same position?
Well, it's the ideal scenario that an item remains where it is. If it has to be removed, then if it can be put back again, that would be ideal. Otherwise, a secondary aim would be to relocate it within the same setting. In this case, that's Cathedral Square. And then the last resort would be to relocate it to another site, which often has the effect of removing a lot of its significance.
So in all the designs that we've done over the years and the millions of dollars that have been spent designing and redesigning Cathedral Square, I haven't actually seen, I believe, one that had the cenotaph anywhere else. So yeah, I would like something added, and that would be the prerequisite for me, that we would be, if the cenotaph had to be moved, then it would have to be replaced back into its current and original position.
But look, I mean, I'm probably going to adjourn the meeting for morning tea so that there's no morning tea outside. Yeah, I'll take questions. Just a minute, please. But the reason is that there's obviously going to have to be a bit of work done on this over the break, and it's not that straightforward because it isn't our order in council. We've been asked for feedback. We don't own the memorial. We don't own the land. We probably need to just consider because we may have to put up some alternatives rather than a single option. But I mean, we're on a deadline, and that's my issue for today in terms of the timing to get something into the minister. So, and I do think it was a genuine oversight that it wasn't raised with us earlier. Melanie?
Yeah, my question's along the same lines. With the wording, it says removing it to make way for another structure. So when you say another structure, that either could be a crane, I guess, or something like that needed for the building, or another extension building. So what is it referring to? Is it referring to either of those?
It's the officer's intent in that drafting was that the structure means building, not a crane.
Right.
So that's an easy
well,
change.
I would support this if we just got rid of the and or any of the rest of it. Only if it cannot be reasonably protected in its current location, but the only way I'd support this actually.
So if the resolution ended at that point, then that would enable it being removed and placed in storage.
Or relocated to a temporary location. And or economic viability to make way.
It's the balance of that sentence.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's reinstatement. Reinstatement
Has anyone got any
it's
more
not building something
questions
new.
for staff? Because as soon as the questions are done, I think we'll take a break and we'll get some wording together that tries and reflects the views. Andrew.
Thank you. And this also relates to the issue of the removal of the memorial. I mean, I'm generally in agreement that the prerequisites and conditions approach is the right one. I'm just interested to drill down a little bit further, particularly given what we've just heard from the heritage experts, on the thinking behind changing the resolution, the recommendation from suitable site on council-owned land in the square, given that if it needs to be moved, and there's obviously the conversation about it being put back in the same place, but if not, then elsewhere in the square, clearly would be preferred. What's the thinking behind broadening that to a publicly accessible site, and would that actually be supported to the same extent from a heritage point of view? And also perhaps any comment on how easily that might be achieved given the need for consenting at the new location.
So I'll start with my thinking and then I'll pass on to Amanda and Brendan. So my thinking on that came out of the discussion in the informal this morning when there were some concerns expressed about the council expressing a preference at this stage, and the knowledge that there has to be another process that the council needs to go through if the relocation is to be to another site within Cathedral Square. So what I was doing there was putting in front of the council meeting another option for that part of the resolution. Now, your second part of your question is that option preferred by the council's heritage experts, and what's their advice? Over to
Yeah,
them.
so I guess what I'm looking for is some heritage advice on your proposed changed wording.
So the publicly accessible wording doesn't give you reassurance that any new site will be compatible with heritage values, which is the key thing we're seeking. And that's a current matter of discretion in the plan when we're considering relocation of heritage items. So ideally, we want to be able to consider that factor.
Which is more important, that or boxing it up and putting it away for a few years? Would you rather see it boxed up and put away than put in a less appropriate heritage site?
The danger with boxing it up is that it takes a lot longer to get it back out onto a public accessible and appropriate site. So that isn't our favoured option.
I mean, the
It's
trouble
also
is that we're not going to debate whether we agree with particular locations as part of feedback on this order in council. That is not going to happen. So,
I suppose what we're just trying to do is maintain the heritage values of it, because the heritage values of it are intrinsic in terms of its location.
I understand that. I understand. Yanni, you had a question?
Sorry, just going to check on the trees. So if we didn't put supporting the removal of the London play trees in and just said that we didn't believe that needed to be done, then they could still get a resource consent to take down the trees. So I was just trying to understand if we... what the time frame for that would be compared to the fast-tracked order in council.
That's hard to predict because the application for the removal of the trees needs to be lodged. You need to see the assessment of environmental effects. The council's resource consent officers will need to make a decision on whether it's going to be notified. It may be that it's feasible that the council's decision is public notification, in which case you've got submitters and opposition, hearings, appeals to the Environment Court. So we're talking there 1 to 2 years, optimistically. The streamlined process means the proposed order in council says that the council has to process the consent application within 40 working days, and Claire is quite comfortable with that, as the council's senior planner is quite comfortable with that as a time frame. So we're talking about the difference between 40 working days and a couple of years.
So my understanding with the RMA changes, there could be an expedited process for consent.
Which RMA changes on it? There was engagement started on a possible wholesale change to the RMA.
I thought there was an ability for people to go further up the food chain and get changes made quicker. Is that only for district plan changes, not for resource consent?
Yeah, that applies for district plan changes. People can also apply to the Environment Court or ask that resource consent applications go straight to the Environment Court without going through a first instance hearing in the council. So that's the sort of process that you've seen for things like Hagley Oval, or there's one underway at the moment to do with the commercial area in Yalthurst. But so that cuts the time frame down by the months that are involved in the first instance council hearing.
Cool, thank you.
All right, well look, I think we'll adjourn for 15 minutes. It's 11:16, so we'll be back here at 11:30 and we'll have a discussion about whether we can get some resolutions that capture the opportunity that we have to feed back to the Minister. So adjourn till 11:30. Thank you.